welcome everybody once again to Brian's Vinyl Records. This is Brian Thomas, and I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about something that I think is very important to all vinyl collectors and vinyl record owners, and that is safely storing and keeping your records and collections safe. And by that I'm talking about things like sleeves, what to look for, what to do, what to buy, and I'm going to talk about kind of my preferences on the sleeves as well. Things like inner sleeves, outer sleeves, what I think is best, are kind of what I'm going to go over today. And I've had some experience with several different things, and I'm going to talk to you about when you get a record to look for certain things that maybe you don't want to see in a record when you purchase it. A lot of used records will come in sleeves that are just not good for the record longevity. So we'll talk about that. So I hope that this discussion is interesting to you. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that is insightful as well. So let's talk about keeping your records safe. The most important thing I think about keeping your records safe, and I think anyone who collects records can tell you, is where you actually store them. That's important because a lot of us don't really think about it. We stack our records on the floor or put them in a corner or something like that. And where you put them is not as important as how you put them there. Things you'd want to avoid, such as having records tilted or leaning against each other. And I see this a lot with vinyl record collections when people post pictures of them. And that's these records are piled on top of each other, but they're at an angle. And while it could most likely be okay for the records, I worry about them bending or warping a record over time when you put a lot of weight and pressure on those records. So for me, the best thing, you can have an angle as long as it's not a weight-bearing angle on your records. So you'll see a lot of people with like a V shape where they'll have a stack of 30 or 40 records going left to right and another stack right next to it going right to left, and they meet in the middle and form kind of a V. Those are probably just fine, but when you have a one-way where you're stacking the records at an angle and the angle is too big and you have a gap in between there, you're putting a lot of pressure. If you have 100 records or even 50 records on top of that bottom one, there's a good chance that it could bow the record, and that's not good overall for the longevity of the record. So that's the first thing. For me personally, I like to keep mine as upright as possible when doing that. So I put as many records into my cubbies as I can. Now I use what a lot of people like to refer to as a Kallax IKEA style shelving unit. And mine wasn't the IKEA one. I have one of those in the other room, but I didn't have enough money to buy two of them, so I ended up buying a couple of Threshold shelves from Target, and they're pretty good. Pretty sturdy shelves. I like them. They have the larger frame with a little bit thinner shelving pieces. But I got 8 shelves, or 8 cubes in each one. I stand them and put my records in there. And I like to put in as many as I can with leaving a room for, I would say, 3 to 4, maybe sometimes even more records to fit in there so that there's room to breathe for the records. I don't like to pack them in so tight that it's hard to get them out or anything like that. So I usually adjust the shelves as I get more records so that I can fit, I would say, probably about 45 to 50 records in each cube. That's how I like to store them, so they're as upright as possible with very little lean against each other. And that, for me, makes me feel safe that the record is not going to warp or bend or anything like that. So that's how I like to store my records. So if you have, like, say, a crate, a lot of people like to store their records in crates, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that you're storing them as upright as you possibly can when you put them in the crate, so that the records don't sit on top of each other and cause the ones towards the bottom to kind of just collapse under the pressure and the weight. So those are things that I look out for in that. So that's my first thing that I kind of want to discuss, is how and where you store your records. I know a lot of people like to store them in crates, so crate after crate after crate, and I think that's kind of a cool look. It's a vintage look for records, and a lot of people are into that. You can find crates almost anywhere. You can buy crates new at Target and all sorts of different places. So they're out there, easy to find, easy to access. But for me, with the amount of records that I have, having crates it just didn't work because you're eventually going to run out of floor room because you don't want to stack the crates on top of each other or anything like that. At least I wouldn't want to do that. So a shelving unit was the best option, and a lot of vinyl record collectors that I've talked to and know really like what they call the Kallax brand from IKEA, and I'm pretty sure IKEA still carries the Kallax brand. They're a really good, sturdy, hard, heavy-duty shelving unit that looks great. You can buy it in multiple colors, and it can handle the weight of a bunch of records, and people don't really realize that when you're buying all these records. It may not sound like much when you have 140 grams versus 180 grams, but it really adds a lot of weight and pressure onto these shelves when you start putting 50, 60 records on each shelving piece. That's a lot of weight to put in there, especially if you're buying the 180 grams, which seems to be really the industry preference, is to go to that kind of size. So keep that in mind as well. I would not recommend buying a shelving unit that has really thin shelves, especially the biggest piece is the outer part of the shelving unit. Make sure that's a nice thick outer part, because that's really going to take on most of the weight, and you don't want that folding over and collapsing on your collection and causing a headache for you there. So the Kallax is the preferred brand, I think, of a lot of our vinyl community. Great brand. I got, like I told you earlier, I got mine at Target, and they were a brand called Threshold. They have a nice thick, probably 1.5 inch thickness on the frame of the unit, and then about 3/4 inch shelving sizes. So it's really nice, really big, easy to put together, and I think they look really good, and they've held up really well to the weight of the records as I keep adding more records to it. So I've been very happy with them so far, and I think that if you're looking for something, I think they run around $59 normally, but a lot of times Target has them on sale, so you can find them at a good price. I think I bought mine for around $40 per shelving unit when they had a big, like, 15% off or something of storage. So they'll do that a lot in, like, the spring and the fall when you're doing your spring cleanings or your fall cleanups for the next season. They'll put this stuff on sale. So always look out for that, because I think it's a good brand. If you can't afford the Kallax, which run around $100 sometimes, you can get them for a little around $70. This is a good alternative for it, I think, as well. So that's what we're going to talk about for storage. I like shelving, but just make sure wherever you store your records that they're safe. You don't want them leaning against each other. I don't like mine on the floor, and I know a lot of people have to do that because they have a ton and just don't have the space for it. I just don't like that, because there's obviously the possibility of someone tripping over them, kicking them. It's just not my type of thing. So shelving units are awesome. Crates are great. Different things. The big point is don't put too much pressure on the bottom records of your collection. Make sure that the weight is evenly dispersed so that you get the most life out of them and you get less warping going on. Alright, so that covers kind of where I like to store records and storing them. Let's talk about keeping the records themselves safe. The first thing I want to talk about is the inner sleeves. Everybody knows the paper sleeves that most records these days come in. When you buy kind of the higher end records or the deluxe records, you'll see in there a lot of times, especially if you buy a Music on Vinyl release or a hi-fi release or anything like that, they come with a nice sleeve that's a paper sleeve, but inside they have a poly lining in them, and that protects those records better. So by poly lining, it's got this really nice, like, it's almost a film substance, plastic substance in there, but it really does well to protect your records. And those are the kind of sleeves that I started looking for once I collected a lot more records and wanted to keep them really safe. Some things to look out for. Some record companies, especially back in the older days, to save a couple bucks, gave you this really filmy plastic sleeve that contained the records. Real flimsy, crinkly, just gross sleeve. And some of them where you could pull them out and it feels like there's an oil or grease or something on them. If you have records that have those in them, toss them away. Get rid of them. They're bad for the records. Over time, they can cause interference on the records. They can cause the records to have film residue left on them and degrade the playing quality of your records. So anytime you have a record that's sitting in a non-paper sleeve, especially, paper sleeves are standard. They're going to protect your record just fine. They're not as detrimental to records. If you have a non-paper sleeve that isn't a poly lining, so by that, to look for basically a paper sleeve that has a plastic feel inside but no film residue. It's a real nice thing that you'll see on a lot of records now. But if you see one that has just this plastic clear, sometimes they have words on them from the record company, whatever, do yourself a favor and get rid of them as soon as you can. Go buy some cheap paper sleeves for the time being. If you can, go buy some real nice sleeves. And your local record store is going to have nice sleeves. Let's talk about nice sleeves. Paper ones are fine. They're not, the best sleeves to have in the world, but they're not going to ruin your records either. They may scratch over time with some records, but it's a standard. You can get away with using paper sleeves. I personally prefer, especially on my favorite records or my more closer to mint records, your VG pluses, your near mint minuses, things like that. I want to protect those a little more. So what I do, I have a local record store that carries, they call them polyline sleeves, and you can get them like 50 sleeves for $20 or something like that. It's not too expensive. And so what I like to do is I get those, and I will go through my records and replace any of the paper sleeves, especially the sleeves I don't want, and put the poly sleeves in there to protect the record a little more. It makes it feel nicer, it looks nicer, and I feel safer putting my record in that. So that I get at my local record store. I'm not even sure what the brand is because they don't have a brand on the packaging, but they're really nice. They're quality sleeves. I like them a lot, and the local record store carries them, so I run and get those. Now, recently, I found another sleeve that I really, really like as well, that I've seen a lot of people use, especially on your vinyl video podcasters and things like that. A lot of times you're going to see them when they're talking about their records, pull it out, and you'll see this sleeve. And my local record store, I was not there one day. I was at a different record store, a great record store that I love in the Twin Cities here, and they had these ones. So I thought, okay, I'll give these a try because I've seen people use them. These are the MoFi or Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab Original Master Recording sleeves. 50 sleeves for $20 is what you get for the price on these, and they're absolutely fantastic. They're like a poly sleeve that has anti-static materials with a nice soft inner side for the record to sit on, and it just looks great, especially if you're storing your records in a certain way, which we'll get to in a minute. You can have it sit on the outside there and looks really cool, and it has master sleeve writing on it, and so people might think it looks even more important. But I've found these recently, and I really like them a lot, and I've actually decided to switch brands from the generic poly sleeves to these guys. So I've ordered a couple 50 packs of these, and any records I buy now get moved into those if they don't have a good lining in them. So your inner sleeve liner is very important for several reasons that I've talked about already. Keeping your records safe, keeping them scratch free, and keeping them static free. Static is a killer. Not necessarily for the record, it's not good for the record, but your sound system. Anytime you make a pop or a crack into your speakers, that's not good for your speakers or your system to handle. So getting an anti-static sleeve, which technically should keep the static at a minimum when you put your record on or take it out, is a very important piece. So my recommendation, and you can find this on our website, briansvinylrecords.com. At the bottom of the site, you have my recommendations on records and equipment. This is on there, the original master sleeves. You can click on that link to purchase some of them. Amazon carries them. Most of your local record stores are going to carry this brand as well. It's a more popular brand, and people really dig them. So that's what I'm going with. They're called Original Master Sleeves by Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs. So check those out. I think you'll be very happy if you do go with that. And they're not expensive. 50 of them for $20 is really not a bad deal. So let's talk about the other piece here, an outer sleeve. When you go to a record store and you look at used records, you always see them, almost everywhere you go, you're going to see them in outer sleeves. Many, 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 many vinyl collectors consider it a must to put your records in poly sleeves. And the reason is because it protects your covers. I am one of the few who absolutely hate outer sleeves, and it's a personal preference to me. I am going to recommend to you, if you want to keep your covers safe, clean, dust-free, looking great, go get some outer sleeves. They're not expensive, pretty cheap to get by. They'll protect your records. You'll be happy with them. But for me, personal preference, I just don't like them. I don't like how they look. I don't like how they feel. I don't like how much space they take up. And I don't like that I can't, most of the time, read the record spines as it sits in my shelf. Now, I tried recently to use a method that Frank from channel 33 RPM, it's a great video blog, by the way, for record collectors and people getting interested in records to go find. It's on YouTube. That channel 33 RPM, he does a different way where he takes the records out of the covers, puts the cover in, and puts the record in behind it in the sleeve. It looks great, it's easy access, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to try this out. And I took all of my AC/DC records, which I have a ton, and I've saved all of the plastic sleeves that I have from record stores when I purchase them. I take them out of the sleeves, put them on my shelf, and I take the sleeves and I put them in a bag. So I grabbed a bunch of the sleeves and I started taking the AC/DC records out of the covers, putting the cover in, putting the vinyl in its inner sleeve in behind it, and stacked them all together and then put them on the shelf. And I mean, in theory, I really like how it looks in your hand. But on the shelf, I just didn't like how it looked to me. Again, maybe I just don't have the right outer sleeves. Maybe there's something else I need to look for to do that. But to me, it just looked awful on the shelf. You just had all this plastic standing there. You couldn't read the spines very well without moving the plastic around. It looked bulky in there. It took up a lot more space. I would definitely have to reorganize my shelving unit to open up some space for my record collection. And so I ended up taking them all back out and putting them back the way I had. As I said, that's a personal preference. Most vinyl record collectors are going to tell you that you should always put your records in an outer sleeve. And I'm not going to disagree with them on that. I think that's a very wise thing to say. It's just my personal preference. I don't like how it looks. I don't like how it feels. And I just don't like having it in the shelf that way. It just, to me, it's just not attractive, and I don't want that. The other thing for me is I'm not a collector in the sense that I need to keep my things valuable and safe. That's not me. I am buying records because I enjoy the bands and the music on that media format. That's why I'm buying them. People think I'm strange when I'm buying used records from them. When I say, well, what do you got that maybe the cover's all beat up on, but the vinyl's good? And they're like, well, I got a whole bunch of stuff lying around, but nobody wants to buy those. And well, I do, because I'm not concerned as much with the cover being perfect. Yes, I would like it to be good, nice, in great shape, but if I've got a record that is in VG Plus shape and the cover's in good shape because it's got some water damage or someone wrote on big marker on it or the corners are bent or something like that, I'm okay with that, because really in the end I'm putting that record on to listen to the record, not sit there and stare at the cover. So to me, having the outer sleeves isn't as important. To other people, it's very important. So it's a personal preference. If you do like outer sleeves, there are lots of different options out there. You can find all sorts of stuff, and there's some good ones. And then it's all a personal preference. Try some out, look at how they are, how they feel, that kind of thing. But it is recommended by most of the vinyl community that you do have some sort of outer sleeve to protect your records. Now let's talk about taking care of your records. It's a very important piece of this system. You need to take care of your records to keep them sounding good. And that means regularly cleaning things. Not just the records, but also your stylus. Your stylus is easy to clean. There are tons and tons of options out there for stylus brushes, for stylus cleaners, solutions. There's homemade solution recipes out there for you to find. It's easy to keep clean. So I recommend looking at all these options. I went out and bought some from my local store down the valley here in Minnesota, and bought a little bottle and a brush. And basically you take the bottle, you open it up, you brush on the solution, and you go to your stylus and you give it a couple passes on the stylus, never against the stylus. And that cleans all of the gunk and dust and stuff, dirt that's collected on the stylus that you can't see with your eye. And believe me when I say this, when you do that, you will hear a difference in the sound when you put that stylus on the next record, because junk just makes the sound quality less. So, very important piece is always clean your stylus. And many people recommend you clean it every time you put on a record. Now, I don't do that. I clean mine probably every couple days to make sure it's sounding great. it's important to do. So make sure that you're cleaning the stylus on your record player. And that comes down to then your records. Cleaning records is very important, especially when you're buying used records. You don't know where they've come from. Many used record stores don't clean the records before putting them on the shelves. Many of them do. My personal favorite record store does clean every single record that's in the bins that aren't bargain bin records. And a couple other places I've been to do the same thing. They'll clean them, they'll vac clean them, and make sure that they're in good shape when they hit the shelves. And I love that. That's great. I know I don't have to worry about those. But then you buy records from eBay, you buy records from Discogs, you buy records from people on Facebook groups. Those records not always are going to come to you clean. So what I like to do, once I have about 25 new used vinyl records, I have a unit called the Spin Clean Record Washer. And I'll take that out, and it's just basically distilled water, a solution you can buy, which you can also make. There's plenty of recipes out there to make a good solution as well. And then a unit that you sit the record in and you spin it around into the solution with some brushes. It'll clean out the gunk in between the grooves of your record. It'll make it sparkly. And it's an awesome unit. And it costs about $80 for the base unit, and it's great. It comes with a bottle of solution. Lasts quite a while. I'm still on my first bottle, and I bought mine probably 6 months ago or so. Each spin solution will last you between 25 and 50 records, depending on how dirty they are. And it's just I enjoy spin cleaning my records. I make an event of it. I put a record on. I go and spin clean my records, dry them off, put them in a little dryer, and we're good to go. I'm happy. The records sound better. And to make a point, I had a record that my dad had given me. The record was Paul McCartney's Ram album, original press that he bought when he was young. And it had been through hell. I mean, it was stored in underneath a sink at one point. It was stored it just wasn't stored very well. And finally, he had given me that record, and I remember I took out the record, and it was just filthy dirty. I ended up taking a macro lens on my camera and taking pictures of the gunk on the record, and I then spin cleaned the record and then took a picture of it afterwards, and I sent it to my dad and said, here is this record that has 40 plus years of crap on it that I just cleaned. Look at all the stuff that came off. And the record sounds amazing now. It sounds absolutely amazing. Fun stuff. So spin clean is my preferred method. In between spin cleans, though, I like to get record cleaning solutions, and just once in a while throw it on there, the record, and take a microfiber cloth and wipe it clean before playing it. It's just a good thing to do to get dust. Dust builds up, dirt builds up. Cleaning your records is a good habit to get into, and it will help save them for the long term and keep them sounding crisp, great, and awesome. So that's very important, I think, is to keep your records clean. And spin cleaning, especially when you get new shipments of used records, is a must. Cleaning the records, the new records, I would recommend when you buy a new record to give it a little wipe of some cleaning solution, because it just comes out of the manufacturer. You don't know how long it's been sitting in a warehouse, and they tend to have just stuff on them, leftover residues from cutting it and all that kind of stuff. So highly recommended that you take a new record out of the case, give it a good clean, quick, a little wipe down with some solution to make sure that any gunk or residue that's there is wiped away, and you're not going to get any interference while you're playing your vinyl record for the first time. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. I hope it was entertaining, and I hope you learned something here, and I hope that you will take some of my advice and maybe use some of it. It's pretty straightforward advice, and it's not expensive. I'm not asking you to go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff. It's easy to maintain your record collection and keep them sounding good, and hopefully these pieces that I've laid out for you today will help you keep your record collection at top-notch ability. So thank you for listening to this show, and I hope you've learned something, and I want to know what you do for your storage solutions, your sleeve preferences, and what products to use. I'm always up for trying new products, so if you have something that you really like and want me to try, hey, if you've got an outer sleeve that you think I would actually like and enjoy, that I could put my vinyl record collection in, send them my way. briansvinylrecords@gmail.com. That'll come to me. I'm also on Facebook. You can message me there as well. So thank you for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you have, I hope that you will leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. That allows other people to find the podcast and enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening. Go to briansvinylrecords.com for all the latest news, information, new releases coming out, and everything else. And we'll see you next time. Until then, keep spinning.